you just freaked me out with that $10 million settlement. And this is why I'm only going to be doing like occlusal fillings from now on. This is why I don't do root canals, right?
Yeah, so Eric, the other day I was scrolling on Facebook and I found a post from another dentist who had said that they were being sued.
Okay. Yeah.
Because their website was non-ADA compliant and not American Dental Association. Like this is like American Disabilities Act or something like that.
What does that even mean?
I don't know. Obviously there's, I don't know if there's criteria or if something, like I don't know if you've ever seen on people's websites before where there's like the disability kind of button.
Do you
and
think
like,
I already don't pay attention. Do you think I pay attention to that?
Like I'll sometimes like accidentally press it and I'll be like, what is this? And it's like, oh, you know, for those people with disabilities. And I guess she was being sued because her dental website was not compliant. And I remember this going around like a few years ago. And I always thought it was like a scam. You know, it was like, oh, make sure your thing is ADA compliant or else you'll get sued. So it was like, you know, all the marketers, you know, just
some company was like,
something.
Pay me.
Yeah, exactly. But I guess she really was sued and she had to settle. And so she was, you know, telling everyone in this Facebook group that, you know, watch out, you know, like definitely look at your own website and see what you need to do. So yeah, I don't know what to do about that. Ours are not compliant, I don't think.
Well, I don't know. We should ask the DSO that we're partnered with if we are. We should have that conversation with them, and then hope the attorney that sued them isn't listening to this podcast, right?
Probably not. But yeah, because they even a couple posters. I didn't read through all the posters, but it got a lot of people responding to it. And someone had said that they had, you know, a friend of a friend or something like that worked, you know, at a law firm. And that was their main job, was to look through websites to see if they were compliant or not. And then, you know, go ahead and kind of.
I guess that just feeds into the stereotype of lawyers, right?
I don't know. But anyway, so like, I don't know if that can be classified under something your insurance can help you with, or I don't even know if that. Like what that is.
I don't know if that's like, yeah, do you just have to do it? And if it does happen, like, can you get covered for that?
Yeah, I wonder. So, I mean, there's a lot of things where it's like, oh, we hate having to pay into insurance, but until you need it, right? I mean, I think that's kind of the important part.
I mean, you know me, I'm cheap with stuff. So it's like, if I'm getting a car, like whenever they try to upsell you on any of that insurance stuff, I'm always like, I think I just literally tell them, there is nothing you can say or do that is going to convince me to get this. So and this is, and I'm not saying, I'm saying like, let's not be rude. I'm not trying to be rude with it. I'm just trying to say, you probably have more opportunities to tell the next person to get it. And so instead of wasting a half hour trying to convince me, let's just cut it here. Yeah. And then you can move on. And then both of us can go on with our day.
And I'm a little opposite. I think, you know, it's just like, okay, how can I be really well covered just in case this happens? And, but I think we have good guests on that we can talk about
maybe
this.
Answer this question and tell us some other cool stuff.
So Carrie, Tessa, thanks for coming on. What's your guys' take on this?
Hey, thank you for having us. Our take on this is, yes, you should have an ADA compliant website if you can. And yes, you should have insurance in case somebody accuses you of not having it. And both would be correct.
I mean, have you guys, so this is like a real thing, this happens, does this happen regularly or is this just random?
Yeah, it's not regular. It is more random for sure. And it does seem to be different attorney offices, like you said, check websites. If those are the cases that they're able to go ahead and settle, then we'll see them in pockets, but it kind of comes in waves. So it definitely came a few years ago. The same thing with ADA compliance. For your office, as far as, you know, making sure that your building is compliant and you have ramps and things like that. We saw those for a good while, you know, all that kind of stuff kind of comes in waves.
Will people, because right, like you said, that's like in a physical building. Does that happen? Like, are there people that will just walk around to like dental offices or like certain industries and like pretend to be a patient or walk around and just like purposely
have
be on
their
the
measuring tape and
Yeah,
be
yeah,
like,
like
this doorway is not
like is that what happened?
Yeah.
Or okay,
Yeah.
so it's intentional.
Wow.
Someone is trying to file a claim. It's not like a random patient who said, "Oh, it was really hard for me to get my wheelchair in here. I'd like to file a claim." This is someone who probably doesn't have a disability that's trying to sue someone.
Correct. Yeah. It's that gotcha moment. Like, oh, we got you on this. And they think that they can settle really easily. And yeah.
Yeah, it says ambulance chasing attorneys that are just looking for any way to make a quick buck.
Which gives really good attorneys a bad name because,
Yeah.
yeah.
Nice. So everyone be really afraid, right?
Yeah, so go measure every doorway and
Yeah.
make sure it's all, and you have your ramps and all of that stuff.
I mean, I would think with us though, because we did startups 2017, 2019, right? And I wonder if it's as big of an issue with newer builds, because I would assuming like the code doesn't change all the time, you have to pass inspections,
Yeah.
right? So you'd think that in order for a fire marshal or whoever it is to come in and like sign off on it, that's them. Is that them telling you it's okay, or is it just like, eh?
So you know what they say about assumptions, it makes an ass out of you and me. But I would assume that too, but that doesn't mean that that's something on their checklist. And it doesn't mean that the ADA standards didn't change in the past 7 years. It is something that updates a lot. I mean, just like the several other standards, ordinance of law.
So like,
Well,
yeah, okay.
sometimes if you don't have a mortgage, then they're not like, you don't have a mortgagee that's trying to hold you accountable to follow those regulations as well. So sometimes it can slip through the cracks, or sometimes it can be like, hey, this is effective July 1, and then you don't find out till December.
Yeah. Okay. So don't rely on other people.
Yeah, I guess so.
Because in my head, I would just go to it and be like, oh, well, this claim has no merit on it because this got passed, so we're good. So like it wouldn't even cross my mind, right? I would say like,
Yeah.
oh, well, then we just need to talk to the fire marshal, whoever did that, and signed it off, and like
Or get like whatever documents
Yeah.
we have, and it's like, see, they
Yeah.
they checked it off. We're good.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you'd think, huh?
All right.
That's interesting. But I guess more so for existing offices that are older. I mean, we had an old office.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I don't think that was compliant. I mean, I could barely fit through some of the sections. Like, what is this? Like, little hallway?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. But we were in an office building. So does that? I guess it depends on your lease. But is that liability on you, or is that on like the landlord?
So it's usually on you, right? Because it's your practice and your office. And each set of rules is different. So there's some chances where your building can be grandfathered in depending on when it was built, but some states allow that, some cities don't. It's very different. So as far as, having to have a ramp, having to have accessible, having to have, an elevator in a 2-3 store building, it could be that it's grandfathered in. It could be that you did too much improvements and betterments that that no longer qualifies you for the grandfather status, and then you do have to do it. So it definitely depends.
All right. So we gotta go check our websites or contact our DSO and have them check those websites.
Yeah.
Next on to-do list.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that's one example that I'm sure there's a ton of. So can you dive in and tell us some other like crazy stuff that you've seen being in the dental insurance industry? I'm sure you've got some awesome stories.
Oh my gosh, we have tons.
Unfortunately.
So we've been seeing cyber attacks on dental offices increase, oh my gosh, like 200-fold in the last 5 years. It's been just insane, the stories. So one we had about 3 weeks ago is we had a dental office that it's just crazy. These things happen. So it definitely happened over Martin Luther King weekend. That seems to be when cyber attacks attack.
It's
I
just
guess you
that
could say
weekend
it.
for some reason. That's
Yeah,
their holiday.
They like to attack on Fridays or Friday evenings over weekends because it takes a while for them to be detected. and it takes a while, and it lets them get in there really good, and so that way when you come in on Monday from a long weekend or Tuesday from a long weekend, guess what? None of your systems are there.
So like
Yeah.
that is what happened to us, like, or
You.
my office, like
Yeah.
5 years ago, is Monday morning, and we came in, and that was the situation. Okay, yeah. Sorry, continue.
So yeah. Okay. So what happened?
They monitor your Facebook. They see that you're going to be closed like Friday and Monday. They look at it all.
They do. So the biggest, I mean, it used to be that the ransom was the largest cyber attack. We had a lot of people get ransomed where they said, "Oh, we have your data. If you give us money, we'll let it go." And then, we've had a lot of negotiations with the ransom and having to deal with those. And what's interesting about those is that a lot of people think, oh, these ransom people are in a basement somewhere, or they're like seedy criminals. No, they have a building in the Ukraine and Russia, and they have HR department, and they go to work, and this is their job, and they really have this weird, like,
Do they have a customer
honor
service
among
number?
thieves. Yeah, they have a customer service. They have an honor among thieves. So it's like, if you pay,
Yeah,
they
yeah,
get
they're
some
actually really nice. Yeah, you can. Yeah.
yeah, they're really
So,
nice.
you're researching them. And you're like, what are their Google reviews? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's true. So when we talk about, like, if you're going to pay or not pay, and should you pay the ransom or not pay the ransom, a lot of, especially the carriers that do this a lot and negotiate on your behalf, which, side note, if you have a cyber insurance, please make sure that the carrier negotiates on your behalf and it's not an indemnification situation, because what you don't want to do is have you try and negotiate with them, and then you figure out how to get the Bitcoin they want, and then figure out to have them give you a receipt so that you can give that to your insurance carrier to prove that you paid the ransom, is a nightmare.
Yeah. So like, it's like being out of network with an insurance, right?
Yeah, it's like being out of network, right? Like,
Don't do it.
and there are some different generation dentists, and God bless them, they just are like, I don't understand what Bitcoin is or how I would get it or what you're doing. Can I mail you a check? And
Okay,
they're
so
like,
mainly
no.
you want to make sure, so in our situation, because it was like 5 years ago, it was that Monday morning we came in, and I remember my front office was like, hey, Open Dental's not working. I was like, man, the internet went out or something like that. Like, it's just, we'll have to call IT. And then the screen looked different though. It was like a different screen, and it said something about like, your information is locked. And we were like, that's weird. I haven't seen that before. So then we called our IT company, who was like a locally based one, and they were the ones that got hacked. So they got hacked, and they shot it out to like 60 offices in Colorado. And so they're really, at first, it was kind of like a cluster of like, how did this happen? What went on? And then, so then in our situation, luckily with the insurance provider I had, there was a cybersecurity waiver, whatever you call it, like a waiver clause or whatever, that covered it, and it was up to, I think it was like $50,000. There, I don't think there was an indemnification thing, because they were the ones that hired the attorneys, did all that kind of stuff, negotiated with those people. But the big issue we had is the IT company was the one that got hacked. And they went after the IT company first, and whatever, I don't know what the numbers were, but let's just use like, we want $1.5 million, right, to release all these because there's 50 offices. Well, the IT company either didn't have proper insurance or something, but they were like, we're not going to pay it, and they pushed it on every office. So now it became an us problem because of someone we relied on to do our IT to keep us protected. So like, that was pretty sweet. But so then, yeah, we had to go through the whole thing. Like, I had to talk to attorneys, then we had to talk to negotiators, and
But luckily you did have insurance.
no, I had it. If I didn't, we were a startup, so we opened like literally 5 months prior to that. So
it wasn't even like intentional, like getting insurance that had like cyber security on it. It's like, oh, we have this. Thank goodness we have it.
Oh no, that was
like,
one of those
it
where
did
like,
not come from us as like, oh, we need, like, let's make sure we have cyber security.
Okay, so that goes back to my whole thing. Maybe I should be more open to insurance stuff, because I didn't even know that it was a thing, and I think I initially went into it thinking, oh crap, we're screwed. I don't know what this is going to cost.
Yeah.
And then when I contacted our insurance provider, they were like, oh, you do have this coverage. So I was like, thank God to whoever is a good salesman on that person's
Yeah, did
team
upsell you, yeah.
and did that. But
I mean, is it pretty regular to have that on?
Yeah, is that standard
insurance?
now?
Yeah, is it standard?
No, it's not. It's not standard. It would be great if it was standard. And now 50,000 is not enough. Yeah, that's nothing anymore. So what they're asking for is like the average ransom right now is 1.1 million that we're seeing. Yeah, for a dental office. And obviously they'll negotiate them down, but it's a lot of money, and they're getting more sophisticated about how they get in there and how long they get in there. So we've had a few that have like they compromise your business email. That's more prevalent than ransom, and that does lead to either ransom or it leads to funds transfer. So they get into the business email, they sit in the business email for several weeks. They look at what the invoices look like that you send out. They look at what the invoices that are getting paid from your system look like. They basically know people's calendars. They can figure out what the best time to attack is. And then sometimes they attack all three. Sometimes they ransom if they can get into your data, great. Now there's people that have cloud-based systems and they're hard to get into, and that's great if you have a cloud-based system, but just like you said, you're relying on them for the technology, and we've had cloud-based systems get breached and IT systems that get breached. So you can't control what their technology is. So we've seen that it sit there for sure.
Yeah, so when they're in there sitting in your email system, they are looking at like, what are your normal invoices that you pay? Where does that come from? Do you pay this once a month? And so what we've seen happen, we had a $1 million claim where the dentist's wife paid a normal invoice, but instead of it being a lowercase L in the email, it was an uppercase I. And so it looked exactly the same as their normal invoice, but it was the one digit or one letter that was different. And that's all it took for her to pay that invoice. And she had no idea until after the company who actually should have received the funds was like, hey, where's our money? And she's like, what are you talking about? I paid this.
Yeah. And in that situation, it was a lab bill for a multi-office practice. So they still owed the $1 million to the lab. So the business compromise, they sat in there, saw that this invoice came in, diverted it. So they didn't get the real invoice because they can make those fun rules in Microsoft where they hide. We had a situation where we had somebody go into a payroll company. So they figured out that they were using, one of the bigger payroll companies. They were able to figure out their password based on the passwords that the dental office used for other things. And the fact that they kept recycling the same passwords, which we can have a whole hour lecture about how.
I think that's one of those things that like all of us do it, even though we know it's terrible because we're just like lazy and don't want to switch it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And then get a password manager. We use Keeper. People use other things. It's worth the $10 a month so that it will change your passwords and you need to just let it change them. Oh, so they figured out. So they hacked into or guessed with the password what it might be into the payroll system. And so then they set up 5 employees and they paid each of those employees $20,000. And what we will tell you and what everybody will tell you is that you should not have EFT set up with your payroll. It should be a situation where you have to approve it every other week or every month, depending on how you're paying. You should get the amount and you should have to either verbally or electronically approve what it is. Because if you let them just take money out, what happened was they took the money out of the practice's account, and the payroll provider was like, not on us, right? Because we didn't set up those people, you did. And they found out that the payroll company would at least send an email letting them know when a new employee's been added. But that's exactly what the hackers did, is they just spammed their email with all kinds of stuff. So the dentist just went through and delete because he had so much spam mail and all of the same one. And so it wasn't until they were at Sam's Club trying to use their credit card to buy some stuff for the office that there's no money in the account. And that is when they realized that $100,000 was put into these fake accounts. And because it was over 72 hours, they weren't able to get any of the money back, and their standard cyber policy did not cover it. So the next one is you need to make sure you have funds transfer fraud, which is what that is, cyber social engineering, but funds transfer, and that's
And third party coverage.
yeah.
Yeah,
But,
so like at our like I know how ours is set up with the group we're associated with is it's through
payroll?
through payroll. It's through Paycom, right? And so I know every time either I submit people's pay to like their team, I have to go on the app and I get a notification it's like approve my check, and it goes through it and I have to physically press approve
Yeah.
it. So
Yeah.
I mean it's it's not really even that much of an annoyance. It's not that big
that's
of a
good.
deal, and that's
Yeah.
quick and easy to kind of do.
So yeah, no direct EFTs without some type of, whether it's payroll or paying your mortgage or paying your student loans, just whatever you do, please make sure you're the one that does it, because they can easily hack those things. For sure.
That's funny. I feel like this is when you do you remember the skit like in the 90s that was like Debbie Downer when like Rachel Dratch would do that? I feel like we'll go
On
through
SNL,
stuff
yeah.
and then they'll say something it's like wah wah. Yeah.
So along that, what other instances are there where like dentists think that something is covered and it isn't?
There's tons. So in basic cyber policies, especially if it's added on to like your office policy or your professional, it normally doesn't include the cost for the forensic investigation. And that's where it's really important to have an IT team that knows dental offices and knows the HIPAA laws, because we've had situations where the office IT, which they are always like, I don't need cyber insurance because I have an amazing IT guy. And we're like, I'm sure they're great, but like you can't prevent everything, and
It can still be hacked.
it
right?
can still be hacked. and like this is all these people do. So they try all day long. But anyways, so we've had a situation where the IT company just unplugged the computers out of the wall, scrubbed them, and then reinstalled the software and was like, let's start again. And you're like, okay, that worked to get you up and running. However, under HIPAA, you have to notify all of those patients who were compromised. And so if we don't know who was and was not compromised, we're going to go ahead and assume that everybody was compromised. And so you need to notify everybody, and also you need to report it to HIPAA, and you have to pay the HIPAA fines, and you're also going to pay the fine for not having the investigation.
So like we had in our situation, it was like you mentioned earlier that it was like ransomware that was bigger like maybe 5 years ago. So that is what ours was. And the hackers didn't they just locked up the information. They didn't take any patient information, and that's what they figured out with their whatever forensic analysis with it, is that there actually wasn't patient records or information taken or that could be taken. And they kind of, I remember when I was talking with like the negotiators or the attorneys, they said at least back 5 years ago, a lot of the hackers purposefully wouldn't do that because that put a bigger target on their back, and they almost took too much information and it made it almost worse for them to do that. I don't know if that's true or not, but so we didn't have to go through the situation of like notifying HIPAA and doing all that, because their report they ran said nothing was
It was just like
taken.
locked.
It was just
Like,
locked.
yeah.
It was just so like we still function like that week. Everything was just paper charts,
Yeah.
right? We went back to that, but like I said, luckily for us, like it disrupted us for a couple weeks, but then our IT company was able to either do like a backup or somehow get us back on. We just had to almost like didn't have data for like the previous couple months worth of stuff.
Well, yeah, because it was locked. Yeah.
But there were offices that like it was months and months and months, and they had no access to anything. They had no insurance coverage. They didn't know how they were going to pay for things, and the IT company that got hacked wasn't helping them. So it was like this just big shitstorm.
No, it could have been way worse. Like, yeah, you were just like a few months open, so it's not like you had a lot.
I know.
You hadn't like reached that like 6-month recall where you're like, oh crap, I don't have any of my, I can't access anything.
But it was a huge. I mean, even with all that and having it, and having we have a dental IT company too, right? That's a bigger company that's good. But even with all that, when they had to reinstall Open Dental, when they had to reinstall the imaging software and do all that, it was still a few months of like cleaning stuff up. And okay, this patient here, we can't find their stuff, or no, it's hidden in this folder. It was over here. It was such a pain in the butt to just work through all the like mess after getting that initial, I guess, getting it unlocked. It like wasn't just like it was unlocked and it was good. It was a pain.
And that's with them not even compromising any files.
I know.
That's nuts.
Yeah.
Right. So so they are. I mean, we are seeing hackers compromise files. 100%. That is happening.
Okay.
And what they do, which is even worse, is that if somebody's not negotiating with them or they don't think they're being taken seriously, they'll publish them on different places. So they'll be like, you don't think we have your files? Here's some of your patient files. Here's some of the information. And then we've seen them where they call the employees because your employees' information is in your files. And they'll call the employees or they'll text the employees and say, hey, your office was hacked. I have your social security number and your office won't pay. And they'll call the patient and say that too, like, oh, your dental office was hacked. We have their information. And here's the stuff we took and they're not willing to pay. You need to call them and tell us to pay them. So we've seen awful things with that. And so then that's a business discussion. Like at some point, if they're proving they have the data, do you pay them? I mean, it's hard. It's a hard decision.
The group that we had worked with when I was dealing with this was through like MedPro, right? Because I mean, we're from Indiana. That's where we went to dental school and everything. And I think they're based out of Fort Wayne.
Yeah.
But they had, like I said, that was nice that they at least had that security writer in there. Fine.
Yeah, we
so
did
like
too on the doctor's company policy as well.
So, like-
there's a few carriers that have them, but they're not. The 50,000 is ending up to not be enough, and they don't pay for the business income. Any of those policies pay for the lost income while you're down, and there's been offices that are down for several weeks where the business income is a really big part of the claim.
Well, that was the other piece we were looking into. Could we file a claim for like business interruption, right? I think is what yeah.
Yeah. So normally the riders on the office policy or the malpractice don't cover that, but the comprehensive standalone you should have that. And more importantly, you can get it so that it also covers business income for like a contingent business. So we had some people that had losses from the Change Healthcare attack.
Yeah.
So they were able to get money to tide them over until they could finally file their claims
Oh,
for
yeah.
change. Yeah, and then get it paid back. So it helped them stay afloat for 2-3 months because I mean you're very reliant on insurance you were using.
I'm trying to think what else. Well, like, so the other thing that I won't post it on like the actual episode, but like there are so many dentists that were pissed at that IT company when that happened, and that they just like try to. He actually just shut the business down and then just opened up a new business, which it's like I feel like that's what happens, but. Man, like there were 60 offices in Colorado that just got hit at the same time. And it like, we're in Facebook groups too, right? So it was one of those where everyone was posting and like sharing what was going on. And it was literally like, and this guy who ran this IT company was just like, oh, I used to work for NASA and you'll never get caught. I have a ton of insurance. It's good. And then I think it was just all kind of a farce, but yeah. Hey, quick break here. If you're enjoying Just a Couple Dentists, don't forget to follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. It's the best way to keep up with new episodes and hear us argue about dumb stuff and complain about dentistry. And trust me, you don't want to miss that. Now back to the show.
So what percentage of cases or claims do you see that are cybersecurity versus like the rest? Like what's kind of the breakdown that you guys see?
Yeah, I would say cyber is definitely the most frequent right now as far as random events, because it seems to be that they get attacked. And it's here and there as far as attacks go, but it's pretty much on the regular. Now with the property, it's all from storms, right? So if a storm comes through, the snowfall comes through, the flooding happens in an area, and we have 12,000 dentists that we insure nationwide. So we see all those storms and at least those, that the claims are coming, or you kind of have an
you can
idea
prepare.
beforehand how to prepare. With the cyber attacks, everybody thinks they're secure. Everybody thinks what they're doing is great. Everybody thinks that having one Wi-Fi for the whole office is totally okay, and not segmenting it is okay. So we definitely get those. Malpractice wise, we are starting to see severity in the claims, not frequency, but like really big nuclear verdicts. And part of that is we're finding that, what do you want to call it? Like social changes, right? In the juries, these nuclear verdicts don't seem like too much for them. They're very emotional led charged juries these days. So we had it wasn't one of our insureds, but there was a dentist in Georgia that had a $10 million verdict against them for a patient who lost feeling in their jaw and cheek from a root canal. And like, they were a general dentist, and not to be mean, but the patient didn't pass away. So it wasn't like a sedation thing, and then the patient, and it was a $10 million verdict, which in our eyes, that's normally like $100,000 case, right? And I'm sure they're going to appeal it, but it was a very nuclear verdict. The other reason why we're seeing severity is that some states allow third-party financing of claims. So law firms have private equity and venture capital that are willing to front them money to sue to be involved in these claims. And so then those are happening in the states where it's allowed to fund the claims, and the states that don't have tort reform, so the verdicts are allowed to be really high. Like Colorado, where you guys are at, there's caps on malpractice and there's caps on general liability, but several states don't have caps.
So just to understand that, where a law firm either may not take on a case, or there may have been a situation where they didn't want to take on a case because either they'd have to put up too much money up front or whatever. Mm-hmm. That now that there's third-party companies that'll front that because they're like, okay, well, we'll do this and we'll get a return on our investment because we're going to get a $10 million verdict and you pay us. That now more law firms are open to maybe trying cases or going further than they had in the past. Yeah, that's tough. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
I can see how that creates a lot of issues. Yeah.
And the malpractice issues that are created from the cyber attacks are, when you can't get into your patient's files, you need a paper chart for sure. But if you can't see what happened before, or you didn't get new consents, or you didn't get new medical questionnaires, then we have issues where if a malpractice claim arises from when you were under that cyber attack, you don't have proof that you had that conversation.
Man, the layers. Oh, that would just be terrible. Back to back.
Yeah, and then
you get cyber attacked, and then you had consents. I mean, do consents even? I mean, there's that big thing out there. It's like, do consents even matter? I mean, if someone signed it or not. I mean, I don't know, but
the consent, the non-consent. The ones that waive. They sign that they don't want to do something. We have a lot of people that use those in the office, not just consents, but the non-consent forms.
So then how does that work? Going back to that case, because you just freaked me out with that $10 million settlement. And this is why I'm only going to be doing like occlusal fillings from now on. This is why I don't do root canals, right? Definitely out of being scared of that. So thank you for the nightmare later tonight. But with insurances though, like when that went to court and that happened, what happens in that situation in terms of who pays what? Like, does the insurance company say we only cover you to a certain amount, and then the dentist has to pay like the difference between it?
Yeah, and so like a second question is like, are dentists normally underinsured? Have you been seeing? So sorry, that's a two-part question here.
No, and I'm going to add a third part in there, because the question is if you have to provide proof of insurance when somebody first files a claim against you, is having higher limits automatically opening you up to a larger suit anyways, right? So there's the three parts to that. In the situation with the 10 million, ideally, yes, the insurance company will pay up to your policy limits. However, there are some situations where they can make the insurance policy pay more because of the good faith defense costs kind of a thing. And so they can come back and find a way for the insurance company to have to pay part of that. There are ways to do it. But I mean, in theory, yes, they would pay up to your limits, whether it's 1 million or 2 million, and then you would have to pay the difference in theory. The second theory being, are you underinsured? Well, I mean, that's a hard line because some people feel like having too much insurance opens you up to bigger lawsuits. That's definitely true in employment practices liability. I mean, almost all of our employment practice liability claims are
The max limit.
max limits, right? Like, so they sue for 10,000 if you have 10,000. They sue for 50,000 if you have 50,000. They sue for 100,000 if you have 100,000. So, for malpractice, there's a lot of dentists out there who believe that they should carry the minimum limits, right? The smallest amount that they can, whether it's 100, 300, or 250, 750. And then they have a really good accountant to help protect all their property
okay,
and
so
all their assets.
like off of that, I understand that logic, because even if you say didn't have coverage or insurance during that point, or you ran into a situation like you said where you were hacked and then they were like, well, you don't have proof. I guess it's a different situation. But if you didn't have any insurance, right? If I was an attorney, I might say, well, the low hanging fruit is just to have the insurance company pay for it, right? Like, we can get that 50 grand pretty easy, or at least there. But if we don't have insurance, now we got to deal with the person. Now we don't know how much money they have. Maybe they only have $5,000. Okay, well, we could try to get more and get 50, but now you're going to have to pay 100 grand in legal fees to get this done because it's going to go to litigation. So I would think attorneys,
low hanging fruit is
and attorneys probably just want to mediate stuff and deal with insurance for those reasons. Yeah. So it is a weird system. I mean, that's not saying don't be insured, but I mean, I understand that logic why someone would say, like, maybe I'll get covered for the minimum amount, because the attorney is just going to anchor the pay to that policy.
Yeah, and a lot of times that is true, because especially if you've got the third party funding, like, they're going to try and go after the deeper pockets, not the shallow pockets. So that's my opinion on that. Now, typically, if you're unless you're a fee for service office, right? If you're taking insurance, they're going to have a minimum requirements that they require. And so most people carry those limits because that's what they have to have in order to be on their plan or in their network, that 1 million, 3 million. The only time that we recommend having higher limits, and we don't love the super nuclear high limits, like MedPro does sell like a 5 million, 6 million limits, and 5 million, 7 million, which is just really high. So typically the only time we recommend having over 1 million, 3 million limits is when you have a lot of assistants and hygienists that work under you, because they share your limits. And like in Georgia and other states, hygienists have more scope of practice, and they can do anesthesiology, and some of them can do a few other things. And so in that case, you either want them to have their own set of limits if they're doing a lot more scope, or you want to be aware that they're sharing in your limit. And so if you have a lot of people sharing in the same limits, that's a lot more patients that are potential suits.
Okay, so then what happens so you said that's just hygienist, or is it
any staff member?
Any staff member?
Any staff members that are not dentists are covered under your policy automatically.
Okay, that makes sense, because I'm sure what could happen is, with that law in Arizona where now like assistants can do like cleanings, right? Yep. I would think now that might change at least the game in Arizona when insurance providers are looking at like what's
the first state to have done this, so
but that's just another provider that you could
And I mean, I remember because I had, I think 2 and 4 because I was in California, and I'm like, oh, someone's definitely gonna sue me.
Is that also something too? Like, is it kind of state dependent too? Like, if you're part of a state where there are caps or things like that, like, you probably don't need more insurance than that, versus if you're in a state, like you said, maybe that is stereotyped as being very litigious, that you probably want higher limits.
Real quick, if you're into what we're talking about and want more, check out my newsletter, Just 2 Minutes. It's the dental blog you can actually read between patients. No fluff, no BS, just straight up tips, stories, and insights to help you level up. You can subscribe over at coupleofdentists.com or just hit the link in our show notes. Now back to the pod.
Yeah, but you'll see like you'll see that reflected in your premium too. Like so you'll see some areas of certain states that are much higher in premium than others.
So if you're in
Yeah.
90210, then probably it's going to be higher,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
Miami, like Dade, Miami
Double.
is double, triple
Yeah.
what some other states are for sure. Just because it's a very litigious area.
Yeah.
California has five rating zones.
And that's
Because
from
there's
like
different pockets.
most likely to get sued to least likely to get sued.
Or like
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
will, you probably will, you most likely
Yeah.
will, and
Yeah.
you definitely will.
I mean,
Just,
like
just
Michigan
wait.
Yeah, Michigan is like one set of rates for Detroit and one set of rates for everywhere else.
That
That's
is
crazy.
crazy. Yeah, that's nuts. Well, yeah, I mean, okay, now I think after this conversation, I'm going to start getting insurance when I get cars now. Right?
We
That's
have
my
a car
new-
insurance.
I know.
You crazy.
Not car insurance, like the extra stuff. Like, do you want gap insurance? Do you want this insurance? Do you want this?
Well, see, that's a big thing too. So like for dentists that like we're in our situation where we own the practice and we're owned. But like when you were like people are associates and stuff and they go from one job to the other, sometimes I mean that's the difference between tail end insurance and
like occurrence based?
and
Is that what that
occurrence
is?
based, right? I mean
Oh,
that's-
yeah. Totally. And I think that is one thing because new grads, we don't know this, right? And I didn't know this either, is a lot of the DSOs will have you on like tail end, right? And so what sucks is when you're like, oh, I worked here for like 6 months and this isn't a good fit. And they're like, all right, well, pay us $5,000 for the rest of your tail end coverage. And you're like, what the hell? So if there was one piece of advice too, I would tell like younger dentists or associates is to at least like talk to someone that sells insurance and that, or just makes you more aware of what that is, like when you're signing a contract and looking at it to see what it is. And I would almost argue, I mean, is it probably cheaper to let them, they may cover you with their tail end, right? And so you're not paying anything. That's just like a benefit for being with a company. Would it make sense to have your own occurrence based plan too? So then when you're at that office, you don't end up paying $4 or $5 grand and maybe you just paid $300 in premiums for that time.
Yeah. So we typically so there's twofold to that, right? One, you can't have two coverages for the same practice. Right? You can't. It's not right. They don't stack. It's not.
Oh, it's not like having
little-
two insurance, like not two dental insurances. One,
Yep, that doesn't work. So you have to have one or the other. Now we recommend that you opt out of the DSO's insurance. Ask them to waive it. Tell them you don't need it. Tell them to just cover you vicariously and show them proof of your coverage.
Yeah, that's super smart. That
right. And
yeah.
we agree. An occurrence is great if you are not in your forever dental practice or you can't keep up with your bills. Like there's definitely benefits to it. A claims made policy covers just as well if you are the type of person that can keep up with your policy, can keep up with your retro date, understand how it works, and then you save your 11% in premiums. But if you don't, if you know that you're going to go to multiple offices, you're going to start and stop, right? If you're going to take time off, then it makes sense to pay the additional and go with an occurrence. And we do recommend, and I say this because I speak at a lot of dental schools. I was just at UF last week and I said, you need to control your malpractice. And it's not just the cost of the tail, but when you're on a DSO's insurance, they're the first named insured. They have the consent to settle right, not you. So if you do something and they decide to settle on your behalf, that goes on your record and it hurts your potential to get malpractice insurance or the cost of it in the future because it's the lawsuit's against you, but they are named insured. So
yeah, and they don't.
right.
I mean, they don't. Yeah. You worked from 2 years ago. They don't give a crap, right? They just want to be done with it. So like, there's definitely like they don't have your best interest in mind there. They just want to be done with it. So
right.
Yeah, that's
so.
Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely DSOs that have occurrence policies. We have a lot of clients that we tell them get occurrence.
I mean, our groups is
yeah. Have a or offer a prepaid tail situation. We do those a lot too. And then there's some offices that let everybody carry their own, and we're not opposed to that as long as everybody's with the same carrier. Because what we've seen is that if you have company A and I have company B and we both saw a patient and something happened, whether it was I was subbing in for you or whatever, and something happens, there's a suit, then my company says it was you and your company says it was me, and nobody's defending against the patient claim together. They're both trying to get their name off of it, the lawsuit. Whereas if I have the same carrier, it doesn't matter whose limits are going to pay, they're going to defend and then figure out the limits after, because either way they're paying.
That makes sense, because that is what, like, when we partnered with our group, we had, at first we kept our own, but it was with the same company that the parent company had. And then they just kind of aggregated everyone into their policy, if that makes sense. So like you kind of, and it was an easy transition because we already had used that. We were using that company. So
I guess where it can get complicated is not just like, because we never practiced together really, and we have had the same carrier, but like when you have specialists that come into your office, that's probably where it can get a little messy. Well,
because the first thing that happens is a claim happens, and what's the first? Everyone puts their hands up, right? Because they're like,
it's not. Yeah, it wasn't me.
The general dentist is going to say, "Oh, that was the specialist there," and then the specialist might say, "Well, you brought in your employees, and it was their issue, right?" And everyone's just going to like pass the blame on someone else.
Well, and the lawsuit's going to have 20 different names on it. They're going to name everybody they possibly can to get the money they need.
All right. Well, thanks for scaring me again.
In those situations, when you have subcontractors coming in, like specialists coming in, you want to make sure you name them on your policy for vicarious, so that in case they don't have coverage or they don't have enough coverage or their coverage has expired or they didn't pay their bill, there's coverage to protect you for work that they've done if you're named in a lawsuit.
Okay. Good to know. I didn't do that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I mean, I think, okay, so I think we're going to put a disclaimer in the beginning of this episode that tells people to like take their Xanax or take whatever they needed right before listening to this.
If you're thinking about quitting dentistry, listen to this one.
Yeah, right.
It is freaky. There's so many ways that you could be exposed.
I think it's important because it is what it is, right? It's the situation. It's what we have to deal with, and I think you just need to be as prepared as you can be for it. So I think that's awesome. So this was awesome. It was really eye opening for us just to hear some of those stories and kind of go into like what can actually happen. So thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thanks for having us.